This is The Search for the Sound. I'm Ross Holmes.
My name is Jason Anick.
And today we're joined by jazz violinist and expert of Middle Eastern playing styles, Layth Sidiq. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you both. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you.
It's an
Yeah,
honor for
it's
us.
it's good to see you. I'm trying to think. The last time we crossed paths must have been in Boston.
Yeah,
You were doing you're doing the global jazz program at
yeah,
Berkeley, and then you were teaching at Tufts, teaching more Middle Eastern traditions there.
yeah. I remember we sat together at the Berkeley Cafe, I think, and we just had a conversation. And then Fernando Michelin was there too, and Nassim, and there was a nice group hang. But you're correct. I've teaching at Tufts University. I'm directing the Arab Music Ensemble there, and I've just in the past years have been more focused on the music from the Arab world, music from where I'm really from, right, and trying to get deeper into it and to portray it and teach it and just be kind of see myself responsible for so to help people appreciate it more in the United States and abroad.
Well, before we get into asking questions and talking about your search for the sounds, for those viewers out there who haven't heard you play, let's listen. Let's watch a clip. It's absolutely beautiful music how you're able to take classical Bach and combine it with the traditional Middle Eastern sounds. Talk to us about this. What an amazing amalgamation of music.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so I grew up, in Jordan to an Iraqi family of musicians, and even though I grew up in the Middle East, my training and background really is in classical music. So Bach, Mozart, Beethoven have been part of my childhood, as well as other Arab composers. And in this pandemic, in the past year, we were living in Barcelona at the time in the mountain, and there was forest and trees. And I thought, I felt this. I wanted to record a piece that resembled the closest thing to something sacred to me, the kind of the nature and sacred kind of imagining the trees as the arches of a cathedral somehow. And of course, Bach's partita, the Allemande, felt like the most appropriate one for me for many reasons. The beautiful melody, but also its use of, the modal use of it, the thematic development, and using a mode that is very similar to a maqam, which we use in Arabic music called nahawand. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to start playing it as a classical player, which talks about my childhood and my experience. And then slowly I'm going to segue into more improvisation and bringing in the ornamentation of the Arab world, which talks about who I am now. So it's really a journey of where I started, where I am now, and hopefully whatever is next. So that was and also my dear friend Fadi Saba, who is a fantastic pianist, recorded some organs on it. So, bringing in a bit of that element of the kind of cathedral or something sacred in a way to accompany me.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. It really resonates with me as well because I'm also a huge fan, as I'm sure a lot of violinists are, of Bach's music. It's something I try to play an hour of Bach every day, but one of the things that I love to do with it is to kind of springboard it and make jazz compositions out of it and improvise over the same harmony that Bach was thinking about when he did it. And so it's amazing that this music, I believe 1600s it was composed.
Ancient.
We're still finding so much so much within it, even in its traditional sense. So we can still
Yeah.
personalize it, and then there's so many places we can take it as well to bring it around the world and to infuse it. And I think it's fantastic. And I've done a similar thing with more jazz. I know people. I think Ross, have you
Oh,
fiddle-fied some Bach?
I've taken Bach and bluegrass the heck out of it.
Yeah,
It's work, man, always.
yeah.
It
So
sounds like a good idea to do like a festival, Global Bach or something like that, and just it sounds like
yes,
a good concept.
yep, yep. Well, it's awesome. So, a big part of your sound is the voice that you have, and the styles, and your the history that's behind every note, of course. But let's talk a little bit about well, maybe before we get into your specific instrument,
Hmm.
and maybe you have it close by to draw a couple notes later for us. Um, but what do you remember, like the first time you heard violin growing up, and were you drawn to it instantly? Was it your first instrument, etc.?
So, as I mentioned, we grew up in a musical house. My father is a piano player. My mother is a violinist. So when I was still in her womb, I was hearing sounds of the violin and the piano just at the house, guests coming in playing. But when I was born, I don't think I remember being drawn to one single instrument because I started when I was 4. So I was pretty young to remember even what that moment really felt like. But I did start with both piano and violin. I don't know which one was first, but I'm the kind of person when at least when I was young, I used to bite my nails a lot, both hands. And piano just didn't seem like an option at that point because it just maybe the nature of the instrument where your hands are free. So when you're waiting, you're just biting. But then I switched to violin, and it seemed that because I had things in my hand the whole time, I couldn't just put them down and start biting. So maybe that was the reason why my parents thought, just stick with violin for now. So,
That's great.
but so I was, young, but I believe, if you're, and my parents definitely pushed me to stick with it. You need that attention and that, careful, watchful eye when you're that young studying an instrument. And them being musicians, I think they really helped push it along. And the years passed and I fell in love with it more and more. And I'm so thankful that that they at least maybe they picked the violin, but I'm really thankful for that because I don't imagine anything else right now.
As are we. We are very thankful that we have the ability to listen to your music, and then you get to share it around the world.
Thank you.
So, of course, because you started young, you would have started out on a fractional size instrument. But as you grew up and you really kind of realized that this was the path that you were going to pursue in your life, what was your experience? And I guess at the time that you were a teenager, were you still living in the Middle East or had you moved elsewhere? And what was the first instrument that you really played that you just zoned out and that was the thing?
So yes, I did grow up in the Middle East until I was about 16. Went to conservatory and did the usual track for a violinist. You imagine competitions or examinations and all of that. And then when I was 16, I went to Manchester in the UK, where I finished my high school diploma at Cheetham School of Music. It's a private boarding school for musicians and pretty intense, competitive place. Although I did learn a lot there. And I think it was there when I really found out that I had something different than the others, that I had that element of Arabic music that kind of singled me out. And I felt that that was some, a positive thing for me. But my teacher, Adrian Levine, who was a fantastic violinist, he kind of had a connection where he was working with different luthiers in the UK and in the United States, and he was always traveling with these really expensive instruments. So one time I tried high Fitz's Guarneri, and in my classroom for one lesson, like for a whole hour class. And it was one of these moments where you feel like you're just in awe, and then you can't control your emotions because, first of all, the history of who held the instrument, right? Second, the instrument is much, what, 3 times your age or more. I mean, what's like 300 years old instrument. And then the way that the sound was just projecting itself kind of for you and makes you sound better than what you really are, or shows your real potential, maybe in that sense. I don't know. And it just made me think when I put that instrument down and picked up my other old instrument, and I thought, man, what can someone do with having a really good instrument, right? And that was a moment when I felt like I really played the violin, right? And so it's kind of etched in my memory. I will never forget I just holding that instrument and being in awe.
I mean, that's for most of our guest show, it's the very common answer is, oh, my friend of mine, helped me upgrade to a nice full size German instrument from, the late 1800s. You just dropped the heaviest mic ever. Yeah, I spent an hour with, the David Guarneri, is about as rare as they come next to Paganini's violin.
Yeah.
It's that and the Chrysler. But it's true, those beautiful instruments really do. I think you're right. You said it beautifully. They provide us with a window to see the potential that we have on an instrument, because the instrument reveals so much in you, and you're bringing so much more out of an instrument. What an amazing gift that you have.
That's great. And so besides, just feeling like, okay, this is finally a real violin. I can actually, this is like, now I know what it's like to really play and to have the most, like that kind of maximum potential. Do you remember some of the kind of colors, the sound, the overall characteristics as well? Or at that time, was it just all encompassing and you said, this is just great? I don't know what it is. It's just great.
A bit of both. I think I was, as again, I was very surprised with how amazing it sounded at first, that I wasn't even listening to details. I was just trying to capture the moment, just feel in my body, feel what that felt like. But I do remember something clearly is that, uh, the instrument's close to the ear. So right next to my ear, which was very quiet and warm and almost
Hmm.
like it's kind of giving you a hug in a way. And I remember telling my teacher, I was saying that I feel like I'm not projecting enough from it. And he's like, "Are you kidding?" Like from the listener's perspective, it's just almost like you have multiple mics on it, and it's really loud and powerful, and gives you that definition of the notes. While to the ear, under your ear, it doesn't feel. It feels very warm, almost like a friend, a very friendly sound. So I really like that, to feel that in that moment, and it's one of these things. I think different instruments, and you both might know more about this than I do, that it differs whether it's loud in your ear and quiet outside or vice versa. But I remember that that conversation.
That, yeah, that is fascinating because I think the dream is to have a violin that at your ear is like, like you said, it's like a pillow. It's
Yeah.
comforting, you enjoy it, but at the same time it has all the qualities of projection. Especially that violin, of course, had to sing in a hall.
Right.
So I think at first when you think, okay, this violin has been at so many concert halls and was clearly the choice of one of the best violinists ever. So they had projection on their mind, they had all these
Mm.
things on their mind, and so when they picked it up and I think Guarneri somehow hit this magic balance between them like really feeling and sounding good and giving you a nice cushion when you play them, where it doesn't just blast your ear. The Guarneris I've tried
Yeah.
and other in research kind of they talk about
Right.
this, how Guarneris do that, but they still have that projection. Whereas Strads, they they have a different thing at the ear, and sometimes it can be like you could like somebody in the room would say that's beautiful, and you're like, is it? It's so colorful. It's too much going on here, and it's less obvious, what's actually happening. And I think it's fascinating with with the violin in particular, how we are so close to where the sound comes out that it sometimes can be tricky to know exactly what something sounds like, which is why we always recommend that people have somebody with them to give them, hey, what does it sound like over there? Or you have another friend of yours to play it for you so you can be at a distance, or
Right.
record it, play it in different rooms. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's wild.
Although I do want to add something, I don't want it to make it seem like it was all this dreamy, beautiful moment. The very first attack actually wasn't that great. I should say that because the instrument is much, it's a mature instrument, again, older than all of us, and it has its own experience. So it definitely gives you that resistance at first. You need to carefully find out the perfect spots in it where it really gives you that sound. So it did take the duration of that hour to really enjoy it. I think if I had 5 minutes, it would be a very different experience with it. So again, yeah, it wasn't just that, oh wow, this is just magic in the first moment. It did take some getting to know it, and I do think that that's better because you feel the process of earning the trust of an instrument in that way.
That's a beautiful statement. Yeah, we really do earn the trust of our instrument? Well, hopefully, I've had a couple fiddles that still fight me to this very day, but but that takes time, and I guess that leads to probably one of the most personal questions: what are you playing now? What's your
Mm. So currently I have two instruments. The one I have with me currently where I am is just a handmade violin. It's unknown actually the maker where it's from. Bought it from a luthier. And it's an instrument that actually I use it to detune a lot, especially the music I play, and I would changing the strings constantly, doing different techniques on it, and traveling a lot with it. So I don't have to worry so much about maintenance. I mean, I do of course take care of it, but I can be a bit relaxed if TSA want to open it up in the airport and so on. So I have that with me currently, and I have a hill bow that I use, which has been phenomenal. And the story of the hill bow actually accompanied my other violin, which is my most precious kind of the thing I own. It's actually to play on a violin, which was a kind of a gift from a dear friend who lives in Boston, in Chestnut Hill. And it's a person that I got to know, a very dear friend. Her husband, late husband, was a violinist, studied with Galamian in New York, but is also an architect. And after he passed away, she was looking for someone to play on the instrument as alone, for a few years and so on. So someone recommended me through someone and so on, and I went to meet her, and we kind of clicked instantly. She's a phenomenal person with an amazing history, and just it's a, kind of a part of our family now. And I got the instrument on loan for about 4 or 5 years, and I fell in love with the instrument, and it became kind of part of my sound. And after that, fourth, fifth year, I kind of rented a room in this person's house, and I was living with her, and then it came the moment when we discussed that I would actually purchase, the instrument from her. But we came to an agreement that was just really great for both of us, meaning financially from my point of view, but also for her. It's a meaningful thing that the instrument that her husband owned would live on, and would be handed to someone who was going to carry that musical message along, right? So, and this instrument is so dear. I don't play on it too much, only for really special occasions, special recordings. I don't travel with it much unless it's a very special concert. So until I'm really settled down somewhere where I can, put it somewhere and keep taking care of it.
That's fantastic. It's so great to hear when one of these instruments that are in that class, violin is becoming, really the Strad or the Guarneri of France. And he's, so many people like Hilary Hahn, for example, chooses a violin, and I've played a few violins. They're wonderful. And sometimes they're in vaults,
Yeah.
and it's so great when you like a story like that is so fantastic when not only are you now able to own one of these top tier instruments, you are doing it justice, you are able to carry on a legacy, there's a great story behind it, there's history. It's great to hear when you find an instrument that connects on that level. Yeah, and I'm so excited for you, and I'm sure that will probably be a lifelong instrument that lives with you, and you use it for many years, record with it, and probably still learn. It's probably teaching you so much.
All the time, all the time. And I'm a very sentimental person as well, in like my character. So I'm the kind of person that just takes things philosophically all the time. So whenever I open the case and pick the instrument out, I just visualize all the people that have done the same exact motion, taking it out of the case and cleaning the rosin off the fingerboard and just putting the bow on the strings, and just all this motion, this movement. How many times has that happened with the same instrument? And some like trying to hear the instrument talk. Just tell me what you've lived through. I mean, this is from the 1840s, 1830s, the when it was probably made. So it's I always try to imagine that it's just much bigger than I am, and that just allows me to like live and swim in that space, and it just helps me a lot creatively when I'm improvising or writing and composing. It just it all gels together.
How do you find with the comparison between when it's hard to compare anything to a violin because they are just wonderful instruments? But how do you compare the experience of the instrument that you travel with that you showed
Mhm.
us earlier with the violin in that this one you are, it's not that you're less careful with it, but there's a bit more, you're a bit more relaxed, and you've talked about different tunings and just
Yeah.
the feel of the two instruments. How do you flow between them, and how do you gain, as you move through inspiration, how do they work seamlessly together, or maybe
Mm.
not?
Well, I mean, this instrument, the reason why I also got it is because of the way the neck is, the lower action on the fingers, on the fingerboard, because of the just getting all the ornaments. Hopefully, if I present something, you'll hear some of those ideas. The fast kind of playing, the ornamentation, sliding between different notes. So that this instrument really helps with that. It's not, I mean, comparing sound and projection. I mean, there's no way you can compare both. But I've also grown to really love this instrument in a different way. Um, it's almost like the violin. It's this elite instrument that's kind of a royalty, and this instrument is almost like someone like me who's kind of this, I don't know, simple person. So I can talk with this instrument in one tone, and with the other one I have to be maybe a bit more respectful when I'm playing on it, and just especially with this one I feel that I can just pick it up and play and just go to a concert and just play. With the violin I will need a few more days beforehand just to get back into the sound, and where the bow really needs to sit on the instrument, closer to the fingerboard, sometimes closer to the bridge. Just reminding myself of the sound of the instrument, and getting to know it again. So in many ways that I almost for certain instances prefer this one to the violin because of just the ease of playing it. I would say it's funny and weird to say that. I mean, but it's just the reality of how it is, especially I should say when I'm playing kind of Arabic music. It just fits better. And I should also mention that I recently was endorsed by Tomastic in Feld, which has been great also because I love their strings, and kind of using them with this instrument has been much better than the other as well. So a lot of elements come in play in choosing which one for which occasion.
Definitely, yeah. Well, welcome to the Tomastic team. I've been on with Tomastic for maybe 5 or 6 years.
Yeah,
I used the Peter
wonderful.
Infels, great strings.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's fascinating, and it's really important to share this perspective of how you can have a violon and a more a violin for the people kind of thing, like you
Yeah.
said. That is accessible, and you can enjoy both. You can be yourself on both. You have a voice. They both have their strengths. They both have their places, because it's really important. I think a lot of people like would think that you'd get a Strat and then you'd never touch another instrument, or everything would be less than. But it's not always the case. They
Mm.
do so much for you, but that doesn't mean that there aren't other instruments that you can have in your life. Or maybe you have two bows, one that does this, one that does that.
Right.
When we have that opportunity, it's fantastic. And I would love to hear a little bit of this, especially some Arabic music and some of these ornamentations and some of
Mm.
the different modes you talk about. I think it's so fascinating, and I love that you are helping to get this beautiful music out there, and we'd love to be a part of that.
Of course, yeah. I mean, I definitely have it ready here. And just to explain the tuning quickly for those of you who are listening and watching that might not know about this, is that unlike the usual tuning of G, D, A, E in fifths, the upper two strings on the violin are tuned down one step, giving you another G and another D, giving you kind of a mirroring of a lower octave and an upper octave. And that in many ways mimics so between the middle and the middle strings you have a fourth, and that's similar to the tuning of the oud, the lute, the Arabic lute, and helps with playing the maqamat, the modes in Arabic music, and playing quarter tones in special ways, and modulating also between different sounds. So what I'll be presenting is an improvisation. I'm going to be using a specific mode called Hijaz. Sounds like this. This is the main tetrachord, you should say, of this sound. And I'll be using that, especially the fourth degree, the G, which is an open string here for me, and using that to go to different tetrachords, maybe a major, maybe a sharp 11, or we have different names for them too, but I don't want to use terms that you might not know what they are. But you'll see how the colors, it's like you have an empty canvas, and I just have this freedom of picking whatever color I want and just brushing, and knowing that something magical will happen. And this is the beauty of using this idea of tetrachords, as we call them, ajnas, is to play with Lego, almost feeling like a kid again and being creative with that. So here's just a short demonstration.
Oh man,
Ah, so great to hear. So incredible.
Thank you.
I feel speechless right now. It was beautiful. It was like hearing a prayer.
Thank you. Thank you. And I hope kind of notice those shift of colors from major to you know to this minor warm sound with the quarter tone and going up and this. I love this because it allows me to be really creative with the storytelling, like um, to not have to necessarily follow something else that's being, well, it may be imposed. It's not the right word. You can tell me maybe another word to use. But in my experience, when I approached and at least learned a little bit about jazz and harmonic progressions and following that it did feel a little bit limiting to me personally, because I was at this stage at least, I'm following something else. I'm following a progression that is telling me, dictating me like what I should be doing at what specific moment of time. Now this could be completely incorrect based on your experiences, because maybe it's the other way around for you. But this coming from this melodic tradition allowed me to bring that into that other side and just think about melody, and then have that be at the forefront of things, and it gives me that freedom and that open space to really share and transmit these emotions.
Yeah, I think it's yes. As somebody who loves improvising over jazz progressions, yeah, I do know what you mean. Like there's certain rules. You're kind of telling a story together, and in order to do that, there is some harmonic structure, rhythmic structure to follow, and then there's a lot of things you can do creatively within that. But I would say somebody who also loves just like the expressiveness of not being held back. This kind of improvisation, or what I would do more like free improvisation, conversational, and storytelling improvisation. I love it as well, and it's so great to just be able to tap into something like that.
There's an interesting thing with listening to you play, and of course hearing you on record and watching your videos on YouTube. It's enlightening, but to actually watch you in person play, it's a different experience, of course, for any musician. But one of the things that I really noticed, and as I was listening to your usage of ornamentation, how very similar it is to other regions around the world, though in Celtic music, the almost triplets grace you would do with your left hand, they often do with their bow. The same kind of sonic intent winds up coming out of the instrument. It's not dissimilar. It's so fluid for you, and with the cross tuning, how do you find that the instrument itself? Noticing that you were really accentuating it in particular places on the instrument, is it because of how you're just improvising, or you're trying to actually pull out a different sound or color from that place on the instrument?
Actually, I'm not really entirely sure. I've been recently just thinking about kind of my playing. I think in the past I've just been playing and that's it. But kind of to really think deeper about the choices that I make and why I make it. For me, it just has always been a steady progression of myself as an artist and just the influences around me. But I never really got to think about it so much. But in terms of the tuning of the instrument, I feel like around this area, the middle part of the instrument, having the open string on the G, acts for me as a doorway, as a pivot note, as a doorway to open up choices, whether I'm going to, like, I can do, or all those different tetrachord combinations there, but still keeping the in the bottom, or, and so I'm lingering usually in that middle section of it because I'm trying to find a different way, and I hate when I fall into a routine, or like if I'm playing an improvisation and I repeat a phrase that I had done before, I'm like, okay, I'm recycling material now. Like I feel like I want to come up with new things. But the tuning also of the instrument allows for that warmth in the upper part of especially the high E string, now a D, in that it creates a warmth, and I just enjoy that climactic moment. So I always go to it. If I hear myself back, I'm always going to hear this specific phrase. I repeat all the time because it's that burning that's coming out from within. And I don't think I would have enjoyed it as much if I was doing the same exact maqam, but with like for example, instead of D, I'm doing it on E in this case, so I have an open E string. It wouldn't just feel the same. I mostly do that in this tuning than in the other. So if I'm tuned to the regular tuning, I'm doing different phrases, different musical ideas completely. So it shifts my creativity depending on what tuning I'm using.
Yeah, and what part of the instrument rings out, what notes really resonate and which don't. I think this is something that I would love your opinion on, because to me, besides of course, like, being able to find the microtones and hear them and be able to use them in a way, I've explored a little bit myself, and it has such a really unique effect from an acoustic standpoint, because it does hit a spot that doesn't ring in the normal place. And there's a really cool, like, it's such a kind of, it hits you right in the heart when you hit it, and you do it within these combinations of these modes that you're playing.
Yeah.
I would love to hear your thoughts on, using microtones, the effect, and then how you kind of see that they work from an acoustic standpoint, or with like with your instrument.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of for string players mostly, or to think about it in, let's say we are starting on D, and then we're looking for an E half flat, so that quarter tone on the E. So the way to think about it is that it's 3/4 of a step away from D. So E flat is a half a step, and it's a quarter above from that. That's where it really sits. Of course, based on what maqam, if you get really into detail, based on what maqam you're using and what context, that note can shift slightly, and this is, but as a general concept, the best way to kind of really find that note is to play a minor third between the D and the F natural, maybe a bit of a lowered F, and then just basically place the first finger right in the middle between the back of the fingerboard and then the F. So put it right in the center because it's 3/4 of a step away from the F, and 3/4 away from the D. So basically, my teacher and your colleague as well, Jason, is Simon Shaheen, doesn't call it a microtone. He hates that term. He calls it a neutral tone, because it really is the middle tone, and micro almost diminishes its value. Microtone, it's a neutral tone. It's something that we've actually used to listening to. I've heard it millions of times in New York subway, in the sound of the humming of the electricity. I'm always hearing quarter tones in those places. So and my second advice for if you're approaching microtones is to actually approach it through a melody, because oftentimes I think there's a mistake, and this is coming from our classical background, is when you're learning about a new scale, and we don't use the word scale usually, we use the word maqam, you don't really learn it as an exercise. I wouldn't ask my students, for example, to do. That defies the purpose of a melodic framework, a melodic approach. So I would give them a melody, for example, where the melody keeps hitting that note. So that, with listening to it and visually looking at where it sits, building up that muscle memory on the instrument, it kind of gets you to that. And much like both the genres that you play, Jason and Ross, kind of listening to the repertoire is the most ideal way to really get inside the sound of any of those kind of maqamat or modes. I never thought about the resonance of a microtone on the instrument or where it sits. All I know is that some days it's nice to me, other days it's not as nice to me. All I would say about that.
Oh, I love that. Oh, thank you so much. I know I appreciate it, and I'm sure people listening in who are new to this style, it's just so great to hear it and to see it done and have some perspective, and they can explore it. How much of it comes from singing? How much comes from oud as far as emulating and listening from this? Because to me it's they always say the violin is so close to the human voice, but the way you're playing, it gets even closer because of how free it is and how much you can explore within these neutral tones and all the variances, and the fact that you right off the bat are thinking about these very singable melodies. How much comes back to singing?
Yeah, in the music itself, when you think about the ensemble, the chamber ensemble in Arabic music, which you call a takht ensemble, that is the term for it. Usually the voice sits at the very top of the pyramid, if you want to say. Like, it's the most important part. It reads the poetry, usually. And in Egypt, in the last century, if you would go to a performance without, just an instrumental performance, you should say without the voice, they would call it silent music. Silent referring to the absence of voice, right? So voice is the most important, and singing is a vital way to really get inside the music, especially Arabic music. And I'll tell you about the first experience that I really found that sound on my instrument. I was about 10 years old, I think, or 9. I was in my bedroom practicing Bach, actually Alamand. I was the same piece that we just heard before. And in that moment, in Jordan, as an Islamic country, you have the call to prayer from the mosques 5 times a day, and we're very used to it. I mean, at some point when you're a kid, maybe you're scared of it a little bit because it's this weird, strange sound coming from the sky. You don't know where it's coming from. And then, of course, you know what it is. And I was practicing the Bach, and then I heard the mu'adhin, or the reciter in that case, doing the call to prayer, which is actually in the same maqam that I played. Da-da-da-dum. And then I stopped in that second practicing, and I don't know why I connected that what he is singing is actually music I can play. I had never made that connection before. To me, that was something that was foreign, separate to music. It was something else because it's religious. It was not music. I had not made that connection yet. And then I started to accompany or trying to follow. I learned from that melody, which is a beautiful, actually, educational melody for this maqam. So I kind of started to accompany and follow it, and I thought, wow, I can actually be taking classes, you know, from this sound in the sky, just free lessons all the time. So because they do these call to prayers in different maqamat sometimes, depending on the time of day. So my first really training in Arabic music was listening to the mosque sing in the sky. And I never was a religious person. I am not even to this day. But there was so much musical content in that moment that it just translated so well on the instrument. And this was the kind of the first instant where I thought, yeah, I learned Arabic music from the voice. That's where it came from. That was the first spark. So again, that solidifies the point I made earlier, that it really is all about the voice, not about the bass, but the voice.
That might be the purest story of musical discovery I've ever heard in my life. It's unbelievable. And in those moments, it's really true. So many prolific musicians have singers in their own words. You should be able to play what you can hum and what you can sing. And that, especially with the violin, because the nature of the way that we can inflect on the instrument, the same with our voices, they really do, they're just so interwoven together that, of course, it makes sense that you would take the traditional call to prayers and start riffing around it.
Yeah. Like nowadays, if I would say that story, it will be seen as some, there's this big dialogue whether music is, between the communities in the Arab world, especially the Islamic communities, whether music is actually a sin, whether music is something that you should be practicing because it distracts you from the act of prayer, and so on. But it's a part of it is education, part of it is just the way people have been brought up. But this story really for me is that I actually learned music from religion, from the mosque. So there's an instant connection there. And it doesn't mean that we have to separate the two, but learn from the two in that case, because it was melodies, ancient melodies that I'm using to this day in this contemporary world. So.
Well, awesome. It's been so great to talk with you. Ross, any final questions?
I guess my final question is, it's a bit irrelevant at this point. We'd like to ask everybody, if our guests, if they're still searching for the sound, but it sounds like you very much have found your lifetime partners with your violin and your contemporary instrument and the purpose of each one.
Well, I mean, yeah, in terms of sound of the instrument, I think I am pretty content with where I am right now. But in terms of musical sound and ideas, I think that's something I'll continue searching for, because I'm always listening to different kinds of music that are impressing me, inspiring me to try different things, language, vocabulary. So that, I think, hopefully that will be a continuous journey until the day I stop playing. But in terms of actual instrument sound and being comfortable with the way I'm playing, and being also thinking clearly about what musical decisions I'm making in my playing. Because one of the best compliments I think you can get as an artist, at least in my opinion, is if someone says, "Oh, I heard this MP3 recording and I knew it was you," right? Mm-hmm. Because that's the language of Layth, or language of Jason, or of Russ, right? So this is, I've been thankful and grateful to have heard that comment, a couple of times in my career so far, and that solidifies the thing that I'm working towards something that is meaningful to me, and it keeps me going, so I'm happy about that.
This has been such a beautiful view, and we're so grateful for your time and tuning in from the other side of the planet and sharing this experience that we don't have here in the States.
Thank you both, and I'm looking forward to continue watching more of these sessions, because I think it's a fantastic idea. It's super educational, and just getting, you're giving a platform to different artists. So I think it's so wonderful, so important. And again, very thankful for the invitation.
Well,
our pleasure. Take care.
Thank you.